The question was also asked about interstate exports. This is again, just a sort of summary of results of this, again by firm size. About half the firms that surveyed are engaged in interstate exports at variable sort of percentage levels there as well. 20% of the ICT firms currently are predominantly export-oriented, which is an important finding, with exports of more than 70% of their annual turnover. Now, while we're talking about a sample here, we're quite confident that this sample is both similar to the sample in 2005 and generally representative of the population of ICT firms. So somewhere around 15 to 20% of ICT firms are currently exporting quite significant proportions of their turnover or earning revenue from exports predominantly. Their target markets, the question was asked in a priority way: what's your first, second, third overseas market? US, UK, which is no different to the 2005 study. New Zealand. China was the lowest ranked, I think, in the 2005 studies, now up at 4 or 5 there, under other, which captures mainly European economies. So there's some sort of slight changes in target markets going on in terms of exports that lie behind this data as well. What are the target markets in terms of actual products or services? Majority of companies have come back and listed business intelligence and corporate governance, which I think actually captures financial services, IT and financial services, which wasn't actually asked as a category, and may have caused some concern for some companies that were in that area. But if they have been exporting on the finance side of probably the corporate governance, business intelligence area, we must remember that next time and have the appropriate category in there. Health is a very interesting one, and defence and security. Health, again, has come from sort of nowhere based on previous studies and information that we've got from this industry. The type of export assistance, which was the last question, and the report provided to ICT Council had a one or two page sort of an appendix at the back with quotes and statements from companies and so on about the type of exports or assistance they are after. They're listed there, so subsidies and tax incentives. From an economist's point of view, that's not unexpected that companies would be seeking that form of assistance from government, but very, very important about information about market access, the third one there, and market planning, advice and research. Now, I know that there's a sort of a plethora of agencies from Austrade and state government, DTEDs involved and so on in trying to provide some of this, but it's interesting that these are still some sort of dominant areas, I think, which companies are trying to gain further information about to really understand opportunities for exports and so on. And that's the nature of the small size, medium size firms who find this same sort of pattern across the electronics industry as well. And when you actually then put some of all this information together, you actually say, or see quite a large number, a significant number of South Australian companies that are exporting and want to export, of variable size, with strong growth rates of exports, and then they say something like that to you, or there are another set of companies that say, I'm not exporting, but I am considering it, and what I really need is those. And that's the sort of, based on all the other questions, then this is an important bit of information. Now, I was talking to Adrian before, just by way of sort of conclusion, because I think that might be the last overhead, that the health area, just going back one, the health area, both in terms of products and services and so on, we all know health is a very difficult area to enter into overseas markets. The pharmaceutical industry is a particular sort of example of a products in pharmaceuticals is a very good example. I think what companies were saying is that they do need assistance in trying to break down or understand the regulatory barriers and then try to break down some of those barriers. And we're just talking to Adrian before about what is the appropriate role of government trying to promote exports and businesses that have particular expertise and products to sell and so on in this area. How do government and the ICT Council and industry work together? And I think using health as an example, and perhaps another one maybe in the multimedia area as well, there's a real opportunity, I think, for companies involved in production or involved generally in the health area and the council to come together and sort of now take the basis of this study a little bit further to truly understand from companies both the markets that they are currently exporting into, if they are, where they do want to export, what their capabilities are, what they understand the regulatory barriers. Do they need tax incentives or advice or research, information about markets? What are those barriers that you have to knock down that companies by themselves, particularly if they're small and medium size, will find it unlikely to do? And I could envisage a situation of hypothetically here, if you like, of a government minister, maybe two government ministers, because the health minister might be involved as well, and the industry and trade minister, and those companies and the ICT Council, targeting a particular country or particular market or set of countries. So it's very, very targeted and specific, rather than, yes, we all want to increase under the state strategic plan state exports by 40% and get this amount of growth and so on. Have we got latent potential or real potential in a couple of sectors that would really pay big dividends? And I think this is very worthwhile thinking about. It's something I could see that an ICT Council in a couple of areas. I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm suggesting, the sort of multimedia, digital content, health, I'm sure there are others, working cooperatively with companies to understand what they are currently doing and what those impediments are, and then really trying to target and break down quite specifically those barriers to export performance. Because the benefits that you'll see from other slides is that these are South Australian firms that are employing South Australians, and if we can increase the rate of export growth, then we're sort of underpinning a growth in employment of South Australians, or employment generally as well. And then all that will feed back into the universities turning out enough people. So I think that is the last slide. So I'm happy to answer questions if people have questions on the presentation. And as I said, I'll make sure that Christine has a copy of she has a copy of the overheads here. They're on that. So if anyone would want them, I'm sure that they can contact.